G'day crew, welcome back to the Bite-sized Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18. We bring to a close this endeavor of transliteration of the epic of the Hindu Bharat, the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, which is within the Mahabharata, the great Hindu epic, which is akin to the Odyssey of Homer, as the classical Greek literature is the same. It's the same size, is the same importance in the fundamental foundational texts of a culture. So chapter 18, I'm going to summarize pretty much what it is that Krishna has said to Arjuna, as the Bhagavad Gita chapter 18 is the final chapter, the final teaching. Now, in my endeavor to do this, well, started many years ago, and I've finally got around to completing it. And I think my original intention was to translate, despite the fact that many teachings of the Gita are in perfect English and are applicable to today's day and age readers, devotees, spiritual aspirants on the path looking for, scriptural relevance of one's own aspirations to better oneself, to be in line with nature, to be found, as it were. My intention was just to minimize it and to make it sort of relevant and bite-sized, meaning that something that you can take on as an everyday application of these ancient teachings. So chapter 18 is great. There's a couple of gems in this final chapter which I absolutely love, and I'll be referencing those. So finally, well, we can say that the Bhagavad Gita is, as I've mentioned many times before, it's Arjuna's dilemma in this battlefield of life. And what ought to be mentioned is the fact that it's a prominent thing to get up and fight. This is what Krishna is telling Arjuna, to get up and fight. But it's not a fighting of darkness. It's not a permission to go forth and slaughter. Now, at the time when it was spoken, the cultural context must be understood that this is the age that things were a lot slower and a lot more pure, and livelihood was a lot more in touch with simplicity. And the lack of technology doesn't necessarily mean the lack of heart, the lack of wisdom and knowledge. There's this, cultural this idea that history is progressing, that we're always bettering ourselves, and that our technology is kind of a reflection that gives light to this sort of perspective. But it isn't always necessarily true. That it could be that they had it right in the past, and these teachings were said because of the knowledge that was prominent. Whether you believe that Krishna spoke these words to Arjuna, or that they were received by listening, as the Vedas were heard in deep states of meditation, there was some kind of understanding of what the future of humanity would look like. That times would get tough, that there would be a lot of confusion, that materialism would be knocking at the door constantly, that there would be darkness, that morality would be gone, that with so much power and technology and control available at one's fingertips, that the wrong messages could easily get out. The politicians would be corrupt, that priests would only be permitting ethics and goodness on a case by case of how much you could donate to the church. There'd be a whole lot of corruption in the future. And so these words were spoken, and because of the fact that we are human, and this battlefield took place between humans, that is a fact of life, that war is sort of eternal, and that these teachings somehow had something of great depth, some sort of ancient truth that stood and still stands, that one can get in touch with. It isn't necessarily a reversing of the clock it's not the other way is better neither, that we had it right in the past and now we're all screwed. So, temporal qualitative notions aside, the fact is that Arjuna didn't know his next step. He didn't know where to go. And many times I turn to the Gita as well, just to be in touch with what really matters. And in essence, one could summarize the Gita by saying that Krishna is saying to Arjuna, if you can get in touch with yourself, then you'll know what to do. If you can still your mind, and he gives these explanations of yoga and how to do so by bringing the vital life air force into between the third eye, to practice yoga, fasting, certain types of austerities, charity. These things purify the intellect, and by doing so, one can come in touch with one's duty, one's innate knowingness. There's this beautiful quote that says by Krishna, by doing your own thing incorrectly is better than doing somebody else's dharma better than them. Which is really a call to authenticity. It's a call to responsibility. And that if you're on this battlefield and you're already dead because you're so wrapped up in what you're doing, that you've killed illusion, so it doesn't matter. You're free to go forth and to fight. And that's what the fighting is all about, to be true and genuine to oneself. Now, particularly this chapter, there's a discussion upon renunciation and the right and wrong types of renunciation. I'm not going to simplify it, and I'm going to sort of stay true to the three guna teachings of the modes of passion and ignorance. That renunciation done in passion is wrong, that renunciation done in ignorance is wrong, which means that if you want to renounce something because your back hurts, you never want to go work again, well, that's kind of wrong. If you want to renounce because you can get other people to do your work, well, that's also sort of wrong. Even Krishna himself, the Lord of the world, the controller, he comes to do work. Even he has a duty to do in this material nature. Those who've renounced aren't just given permission to do nothing. They're sort of set upon this pedestal to rightly criticize and perhaps take action upon these revelations that come without being caught up in the material world. So the right kind of renunciation, well, it's difficult, but taking shelter of the name is certainly important. That renunciation would be made more prominent in this age is due to the fact that this is the age of Kali, and it is said by many teachers, not just myself. Alan Watts has also pointed this out, which is really smack bang on the money when he goes and says, it's going to be a dark age, but it's the easiest to wake up to. It's the easiest age to wake up from, because the calamity is everywhere. The impetus to transcend is stronger than ever. For those who have tuned in, and that's mentioned, he doesn't say tuned in, but I say tuned in. When one says, if you can listen, you can hear your Dharma. The Dharma is everywhere. So we're not just talking about the right types of action in terms of, looking at the right place and the right time for the right person, the right amount, to give just what's needed. But if you're in touch with your inner being, there's this kind of understanding that everybody has that kind of same inner being. So it's not so difficult. So we're not so distant. We're not so different. However, to get too caught up in that view that one is the way to go about things is also incorrect. So there's a constant, in this chapter 18, there's this constant, swinging oscillation until one finds the middle path once again. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Not much more can really be said about it. that it is within the nature of Arjuna to fight, being part of the warrior class. This is a key point, that one ought to maintain the notion that it's not just about telling everybody to get up and take arms to do what's right, but to fight in the name of Dharma, to do what's right, knowingly and justified, that one's true purpose is attained by the act of doing, by simply doing, and to do without attachment. This isn't an endless endeavor. That's also incorrect. It's a task that's done and completed while it's being performed. All right, that's a bit much. Maybe this is understood as the Wu Wei in Chinese, to do without doing sort of thing. But the main point is that if one can be renounced of one's fruits of action, then money sort of just comes about as a kind of points or credits or tokens or something like this. Now, there is one final thing that I'd like to put out there, which is a kind of testimony to the social institution of taxation and governments, whereby that it isn't as black and white as give to Caesar what is Caesar's, as was this in the Roman Empire. One gets taxed every year sort of thing, but it's a kind of pay-as-you-go sort of scenario, as it were, in that if one can renounce the fruits, then as you go, you're sort of this idea of taxation, that the divinity is sort of taking one's due and justified fruits of labor. So that is sort of a way that was set up back in the ancient days, and it's probably being corrupted very much today by incorrect proportions being taken out of one's wage and so forth. But that if one can dovetail one's actions into the service of the higher, call it Krishna or some kind of community that is endowed towards enlightening themselves, that the fluidity of life can maintain itself, that something can come in and something can come out, as does the breath, that there's a constant movement. And to dam one's inhibitions, to create blockages, is kind of incorrect and gives rise to all kinds of trouble internally, greed, ego, and these out of proportion kind of interactions take place. So that what is important to notice, all in all, that Ram is the doer. That the doer of action, we mistakenly take it for ourselves because we get caught up in... This isn't to say that one ought just to do something half-heartedly because it's not really me that's doing it and I don't get any rewards from it. No, it's the kind of satisfaction that comes about that when one is doing, one is in touch with the universe, and the universe is sort of helping you and doing it through you. So that's the pinnacle of the teaching, and each to one's own karma, each to one's own dharma. It's not a socialist teaching particularly, but some sort of tenet can come about from that. The main point is that just try to live a life that's surrendered sufficiently as one can and where one will. That daily act of sacrifice is what keeps one on their toes and in touch with the fluidity of life. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for all your comments and subscriptions and likes. Who knows where this shall go, but personally I'm quite proud of myself for having done so. So let's see that the Bhagavad Gita wisdom can maintain itself as an eternal truth, as an eternal Dharma, the Satanat Dharma from now and to the end of time, and even beyond that too. Thank you. Namaste.